All right, good evening. We're going to go ahead and get started. I know there might be a few kind of stragglers come on in, but we'll get started tonight. I don't have much to say other than we're glad you're here tonight, and hopefully you will learn things, and more than anything, be aware of what is in our world, that it is not just in big cities, but it is in our small cities. Could be even in our very neighborhoods. So I have never in my life heard that said. All right. They say I'm not loud enough. Well, that's why I have one. I just have one button to push. How about now? Nope. Nope. Yeah, but we still need this one to work too. How about now? No. It's not me this time.
Yeah, they're not muted.
See, I told you it wasn't the preacher's fault. How about now? Nope. You're going to get... Yeah, they're both on. Now? Now? Keep. How about now? Oh, there we are. Good job. There's one. How about now? All right. Thank goodness for the men upstairs. Amen. All right. Thank you, guys. Good job. Like I said, we just want tonight to be an awareness that you might know some things that your children, your grandchildren, family members, friends might be facing even on a daily basis. I know I sat through the retired teachers deal that they did. And I learned a whole lot, and it's amazing how closely it is to your very home. So we want you to be aware of that. If you don't know, this is Mike and Mona tonight. They'll be speaking. I know who's going first, and a lot of you all know Wes Coatney. He's the chief of police here. They're going to come. We're just going to turn it over to them, let them kind of share their story. And then I know Wes will share some things just even here locally that you might not even be aware of. So come on up here. I got the mics hot. So, well, I can too, but get on to me when I do that. So.
She never talks.
At all?
Mona doesn't talk, okay. So she looks at me and tells me what I'm supposed to say.
I'll get out of your way.
Well, this is not a pleasant story to talk about for us. This is something that happened 2.5 years ago. And this is a journey that we are still continuing to this day. And I was actually the day before my birthday, September 22nd, great way to start your birthday. I get a call from my youngest son. And if you guys don't know him, first of all, I'm not sure, I don't think he's ours, because he's 6'7", and weighs about 300 pounds. And he looks like a big bear, but he has a heart that you wouldn't believe. But he called us one morning and he just said, "Dad, Jack's gone." And for me, I'm kind of a smart aleck anyway. My first comment I wanted to say, well, where'd he go? Except my son was crying. And for a 30-something-year-old to be crying, something was bad. And I said, well, what do you mean? He said, "Dad, Jack's passed." And that started the journey that we're on now. This journey has affected, and I had to get these numbers because I wanted to make sure they were good. The year Jack passed, there were 70,000 fentanyl overdoses in the United States. In 2022, there were 83,000 fentanyl overdoses out of 106,000 drug overdose deaths in the United States. That's a lot. In 2023, there were 70,000 fentanyl drug overdoses out of 112,000 drug overdoses. So this is a major problem. And this, so that you know a little bit about, this can happen anywhere, and it's not necessarily, you think about someone that is really into drugs on the street, that's their life, they live for their drugs. This was not our son as far as we know, because 2 weeks before his death, 3 weeks before his death, we had taken a vacation together, him and I together, to Mexico to play golf. Spent a week together, no indications of anything going on, first of all. And when we finally get to Oklahoma, when he had passed, and I told Wes, I made a 4-hour drive in about 3 hours, and I apologized to every highway patrolman as I went by him that I was moving. And our son Spencer was there, and his friend Brandon, who he was living with. They had been friends since they were 5 years old, and they come out and they say, "Dad, the detectives say this is a drug overdose." And I said, "Drugs?" I didn't believe it. And Spencer and Brandon both said, "Jack doesn't do drugs. He doesn't even drink anymore. He doesn't do anything. He didn't do anything on the trip in Mexico." So we had no clue. But we do find out it is a drug overdose. And I'll give you a number, and when Wes gets up here, you'll see how much of a chance Jack had of making it through this situation. He took one pill. One pill can kill. One pill can kill. He had 0.7 nanograms in his body. That was after an autopsy, so it had been there for a while. So we don't know. It may have been more, I guess, right after he took the pill. But anyway, I'm going to tell you just a little bit about Jack so you understand what he is, what he was, what kind of a kid he was. Of course, to us, he was perfect. He went to Memorial High School in Edmond, Oklahoma. His brother also went there, one of 3 high schools in Edmond. They're all 6A high schools, the largest class high school you can be in Oklahoma. He was a 4-year golf letterman, 4-year band letterman, played soccer from the time he was 5 years old all the way through middle school on club teams and all that stuff. Really had great groups of friends. Lots of his golfing friends are on the PGA Tour. He was a good golfer. He was a plus 1.5. If anyone knows anything about golf, that means you're under par when you play. And he was a member of Oak Tree Golf Club in Oklahoma, or Edmond, where he managed to win many skins from his friends. And if you're a golfer, that means he wins money. And he enjoyed that. He tried out for the UCO golf team. When he graduated from Memorial, they had a walk-on tournament. He won the walk-on golf tournament by 6 strokes. They picked another person to take the spot because his dad, I think, had more money than I had or something. I don't know what it was. But he always said, "Dad, I won all their beer money from them out at the golf course." But, see, she's telling me to say something else already. I'm getting there. But anyway, he went to University of Central Oklahoma. He graduated in 4 years with a business degree. And he immediately went to work for the Phillips Murr law firm in Oklahoma City, which is probably the largest law firm in Oklahoma City. He was a law clerk. He really enjoyed his job there. Great friends. But during this time, besides all of his golf that he's playing indoor soccer. And as you know, as a 34-year-old playing indoor soccer, which is like soccer on a hockey field, running into the walls, being run into the walls. He always had lots of pains, especially ankles and legs. And we think that's what probably got him started with these pills that he were taking, because he thought it was Oxycontin. And what is even worse, he was getting his pill from a friend. So that's not the kind of friend you want to have, but you don't really know. As again I say, one pill can kill, and it did him. So he, we think, had a good upbringing. We don't think he was a drug addict, but we're not sure now, because you never know with this. We wish we knew, but we think something as silly as being injured and not wanting to go to the doctor, and saying, a friend saying, I have something you can take, let me give this to you and it'll get rid of that, cost him his life. And from this, we have gone to our kids, our other kids, and immediately said to them, talk to our grandkids. They are not to take anything medical-wise except from you or the doctor. And they are firm believers of it right now, because their brothers or his brothers would never believe that this would have happened to him. When I was going through some numbers to get this, I came across something from the Drug Enforcement Agency, and I'm going to share this with you before I give it over to Wes. And this is a statement from the Drug Enforcement Agencies now. It says, the shift from plant-based drugs like heroin and cocaine to synthetic chemical-based drugs like fentanyl and methamphetamines has resulted in the most dangerous and deadly drug crisis the United States has ever seen. And that's where we are right now. Now then, we're getting to the end of our 2.5-year journey now, because the person that gave him the drug has been indicted for murder 1 in Oklahoma. Oklahoma, that is a murder 1 charge. 3 weeks ago, we actually went to this boy's arraignment, who we know and was a friend of our son's. And it was not a very pleasant thing to have to watch. Although I know my wife was nervous in that. She tried to make friends with every inmate that was in the courtroom, except for Charlie. But it was really fun to watch her work. I think she was trying to bring some of them home for rehabilitation. But he went through this, and he was there with his attorney only. Neither one of his parents was there with him to support him. Mona and I were there with an attorney that we hired to keep us informed about everything going on with this, plus another lawyer from his firm, and we also had the assistant attorney general with us as well. And I know when he turned around and saw us, his eyes were about this big, because I think he was scared to death. And I was glad he was scared, because this has really impacted our family a lot. And you can imagine of this happening, 80,000 more families have gone through or are going through the same thing we are now. But the best part was when they did the arraignment, the district or the assistant attorney general left us and walked up to the judge, because he is doing the case. And that really got his attention. And for people that even consider trying to sell drugs or anything. This boy, who is 37 or 38 right now, is looking at a minimum, according to the Attorney General, he will only go what's called a 20-20, which means 20 years in prison, 20 years in probation, and in Oklahoma, he has to fulfill 80% of that sentence. He's going to be an old man when he gets out. And that's not even the worst thing. The worst thing is what's happened to our family. But we are just one of, like I said, 70,000 one year, 83,000 another, 70,000 another. That's a lot of families to be really affected by this. And we will survive. Our family will survive, but we don't want anyone out here to go through this. So I see all these young kids out here, and I say, don't take anything. I don't care if it's your best friend. Don't take an aspirin. If it's a girl, don't take Midol. They make fentanyl in a powder form, and they press it to look like these other pills. And Wes is going to go through this. But I'm going to remind you of a number. Our son, 0.7 nanograms of fentanyl in his body. Killed him. That's all he had. One pill kills. Wes? For having us.
Hey, let's give the Thatches some appreciation. So looking out here, tell me you're a Baptist church without actually telling me you're a Baptist church. The first 5 rows are empty. How are my Baptists on the back there? I see you back there. Hey. First, I'm going to start off with a question. Maybe a little bit of a disclaimer first. I'm a walker, so if I drive you crazy walking back and forth, it's because my brain is working. It needs powered up, and so I have to pace a little bit, number one. Number two, I'm not intending to insult anybody's intelligence. Everything I'm going to talk about here with fentanyl and opioids and things is information that I've picked up over the years of doing my job. You may know everything that I say, but some people don't. Some people are surprised to learn what fentanyl actually is when I talk about it. And I'm not a pharmacist or a doctor, so I'm sure a pharmacist could come up here and tell you all kinds of things about fentanyl. But I'm going to give you some basic law enforcement knowledge about fentanyl. So first of all, I'm Wes Coatney. I'm the chief of police here in Aurora and Marionville. I started out my career, I graduated high school here in Aurora, and I went off to college, played a little football, come back after going through the police academy, and became a policeman here. Actually, I was first, when I was 19, I started working part-time at the Greene County Jail in Springfield, and then I came here at 21 when I was old enough to carry a gun. They let me handle inmates, but not a gun. And so when I became 21, I came here as a policeman. I was here for about 4 or 5 years, and then I went over to the Joplin area, did Joplin, Webb City area over there for law enforcement. Worked there for several years, got a little bit more college under me, and then I went to work for the state. After I went to work for the state, I eventually wound up in the Inspector General's office and kind of promoted up until I became the manager at the Inspector General's office. And so in my unit, I had about 45, 50 investigators sprinkled all over the state that did criminal investigations, crime scene investigations of things that happened on state properties. So things like inside prison system and inside state property, wherever a state property would be. I did investigations in the governor's mansion, did investigations at the Capitol, did investigations everywhere where there was a state office or state interest. So I've done literally, I would say, thousands of death investigations over my 25 years. And most of those death investigations that I did at the state level were related to some kind of an overdose. And so I'm going to start off with a couple of questions. If an airplane, a 747 Boeing, went down right now somewhere in the United States and killed all 250 people, do you think we would see that on the news? Fair to say. What if tomorrow another Boeing 747 went down and killed those 250 people 2 days in a row? What if the next day another one went down, and the next day another one went down, and the next day another one went down? So every day a Boeing 747 goes down and kills 250 people. Do you think that the news would be going crazy? I agree. I think they would too. And luckily that is not happening. However, that same number of people are dying from fentanyl overdoses. So why is that not being, I mean, we're losing 250 people that should not be dying to this. And it's because there's a stigma, oh, they must be drug addicts or whatever. But you just heard the Thatches say, well, their son wasn't a drug addict. Their son had sports injuries and was in pain because he had been working out at a gym and said, man, my whatever's hurting. And a buddy said, well, I've got some OxyContin. Do you want one? And he was like, oh, man, that's great. That would be great. That's a good pain medicine. And so he went home, took the OxyContin, probably slipped off to sleep and never woke up. That's exactly probably what happened. And I'll go through how an opioid overdose kills you. So to understand fentanyl, you really have to understand opioids or opiates, because fentanyl is in the class of opiates. So who in here has heard of opium? Ends with an M. Okay. Opium is a product of what plant? Poppy. So poppies produce poppy seeds. Some of you may eat lemon poppy seed muffins and think, oh my gosh, I hope I'm not getting high. In high amounts, by the way, poppy seeds can cause you to test positive for opioids on a urine test. But we can synthesize that and determine exactly what it is. It was poppy seeds or whatever. But there was a time in my law enforcement career that they told us not to eat lemon poppy seed muffins because you would be potentially positive for opioids. Anyway, so opium is a product of the poppy seed, and from opium they create an opiate. Okay? Opiate is what goes into medication, very good medication. Things like morphine. Some of you in here may have used morphine at some point or another or been given it in a hospital after a surgery. OxyContin, Percocet, hydrocodone, codeine, cough medicine. Things like that have opiates in them, okay? And the reason that those things have them in there is because opiates, as many of you probably know, are a pain management medication. Now, things like hydrocodone have opiate in them, but it's also got acetaminophen in it. So you've got a double whammy there where you've got opiates in there, and then you've got Tylenol basically in there. Or you may find opioids that have different things, and opiates that have different things in them, like ibuprofen and things like that mixed in. Then you'll get a brand name like hydrocodone, or OxyContin is the generic name for something like Percocet. So how does that work? So opium, when ingested and in certain amounts and in concentrations, gets absorbed into your body, goes up to your brain, and what it does is, and we don't really know why it does this, but it blocks the pain receptor in the brain. So whatever was hurting, your brain now is not receiving the signal to say, ouch, that hurts. So you have a back problem, you've had a car wreck, you've had an accident, your arm hurts, whatever. You take an opioid, it goes up, and in strong enough doses, especially if you're not used to taking them, it blocks that pain receptor. Ugh, my arm doesn't hurt anymore. Now, I caution you about this. Did it correct the thing that hurt? No. It only tells your brain to stop feeling it for a minute. And stop feeling it is exactly why opioids are a problem in our community. Because they make you stop feeling a lot of things. They make you basically just kind of curl up. So opioids in the classification of drugs are considered a depressant, okay? It brings people down. In high enough amounts, opioids causes people to become very despondent and unconscious at some level. So you've taken opioids probably at some point in your life, and it probably was a very useful drug. So now this, I do not intend this to get political, but I just have to tell you because it's factual. Our friends in China are very good at making money, right? And they're also very good at science and technology, extremely good. And so our friends in China saw these opioids being sold on the market and started figuring out a way to make one that is synthetic, okay? So how can we make something that does the same thing in the brain that doesn't actually require a poppy plant? And they did it. They synthesized an opioid that did the same thing in the brain as a regular opiate and shut off that pain receptor in the brain. And because it was synthetic, it was 100 times stronger than anything they could make from a poppy plant. So they created fentanyl. Fentanyl is exactly that drug that they synthesized and was able to make, and that company got rich because they started selling it to legitimate drug companies. We can manage pain, especially in the hospital, especially after surgeries. We can manage pain in hundreds of times stronger. Instead of overdosing somebody on morphine, we can give them this. It's 100 times stronger, and it's going to manage pain a lot quicker. And our medical staff want to manage pain. That's one of the big things that they want to do while you're in the hospital or after surgery or whatever. Well, our friends in China also are very good at finding different ways of making money. So I've told you about the legitimate sale of the fentanyl chemical that they sell. But they also sell the fentanyl chemical to drug cartels. And the drug cartels are able to get the base, the fentanyl base, into places like Mexico, Central America, Venezuela, things like that, places like that. And the cartel's paying lots of money, and so the exchange is happening, and so the cartel ends up with fentanyl, knowing that Americans love addiction. You find something that intoxicates an American, they are going to buy it. I don't care if it's alcohol. You guys, luckily we never lived through Prohibition, but there was some pretty angry people that we said no more alcohol. Alcohol, also a depressant. Marijuana, also a depressant. Americans love depressant. There's really only two major stimulants that we deal with in the United States on a large scale, which is methamphetamine and cocaine. Those are the two stimulants. Cocaine is an old hat thing. I don't know if it'll ever make a comeback. Methamphetamine in this area is still a big deal. I had forgotten almost about methamphetamine when I was in other parts of the state, and then I come back down to Aurora, and that's all we're getting. Is meth and some kind of opioid. So anyway, Mexico gets, I don't want to say Mexico, the cartel in Mexico gets this fentanyl and has to figure out a way to deliver it to the United States. This answers a lot of questions that people have on why on earth do they make it look like Midol or an OxyContin or whatever. and then it ends up killing their customer. Like, that doesn't make sense. Why would they do that? They're not meaning to do that. They are disguising the fentanyl as something that they can get across the border, or something that doesn't get looked at quite so heavily. That's the whole reason for it to be pressed. So they mix the fentanyl with baking powder, baking soda, and press it and make it into a pill. Maybe give it some food coloring, maybe give it something to make it look like a certain kind of pill. Load them up, thousands of them at a time, ship them up, and we all know that there's plenty of talk about the security at the border right now. So getting it over here is just really not that big of a problem. So you've got a guy sitting somewhere in a hut measuring out the correct amount of fentanyl for you. How accurate do you think he is? Not. And fentanyl is a whole lot cheaper for them to make and get up here than methamphetamine or marijuana or cocaine. Cocaine, I don't know if you guys have ever watched a documentary about how cocaine's made. It's a process. Methamphetamine is a process. You got to really have all of these ingredients and all of that. That's why we've basically shut down meth labs. You don't hear about meth labs anymore in the United States because they can't get a hold of the stuff. Sudafed was the big thing, and you can only get 2 boxes of it, and you go into a database, and then you can't buy it elsewhere. And so the mules got shut down, and so the meth labs really aren't that strong anymore because they can't get to their Sudafed, or pseudoephedrine is really what they were after. Anyway, fentanyl, whole nother situation. It's easy, it's little, it's tiny, and it hits right where people want it to, because what was a big drug that was an opiate in the 1980s? Quiz? In the 90s, 80s, big opioid drug? Heroin, right? Heroin, on the microscopic level, looks almost identical to morphine. Morphine and heroin, almost identical, the same drug. Almost no difference whatsoever. Heroin is street level morphine, is what it really is. And so these people knew that we had plenty of an opioid addiction problem in the United States. Plenty of people that were taking pain pills, plenty of people that were on heroin. And so this fentanyl was cheaper, and they could lace it and cut it with whatever else people are taking. So remember, cartel are business people. So what they realized is they could make fentanyl for a fraction of the cost that they can make heroin. So what do? They take a powdery substance like heroin with a little bit of heroin in it and mix it with fentanyl and then send it up. Stronger drug, it's better stuff, whole lot cheaper for them to make, and they sell it like it's going out of style. Problem is, it's 100 times stronger than heroin ever was. And so when somebody has used heroin for 20 years and they're used to taking this amount, and then they get a hold of something from somebody and it's got fentanyl in it, and they take that same amount, what happens? They have absolutely no idea that they're about to die, because it will instantly overdose them. Even though they're taking the same amount of heroin that they've always taken, it's got fentanyl in it. And so you're getting 100 times more powerful punch. So why does it kill you? So I mentioned earlier that opioids blocks the pain receptor in your brain. In high amounts, it blocks all the receptors in your brain. What does that mean? So if you take so much of it that you don't stay conscious and you go to sleep, because remember, opioids is a downer, so it makes you sleepy, right? Do you guys breathe when you're asleep? What if your brain tells you to stop breathing while you're asleep? If it doesn't have a receptor telling you to breathe, what happens? You stop breathing and you die. That is what happened to the Thatch's kid. He went to sleep, he got tired, he got sleepy, just like he expected to with an OxyContin, and he drifted off to sleep, and that pain receptor, that overdose of fentanyl in his brain, told his brain, everything's fine, I don't need you to do anything, and he just stopped breathing and he slipped away. That's what happened. He probably had absolutely no idea that he was overdosing before he overdosed. I'm sure he was sound asleep and drifted away. I guess that's good news for the Thatches in some weird way, but it's terrible news because we now have somebody that died of an overdose who was not a drug addict, who was not addicted to opioids, and who just simply got a prescription pill from a friend, and it had too much fentanyl in it, and he died. So they mentioned 0.7 nanograms, okay? Think back to school. Well, how much is a nanogram? Is that a lot? No. 0.7 nanograms, so 1 gram is 1,000 nanograms. So if you take 1,000 nanograms, that gives you a gram. So everybody hold out your hand for a minute. Look at your palm. Imagine that I just walked by with a salt shaker and shaked some salt into your hand. Imagine in the palm of your hand you have 2 granules of table salt in the palm of your hand. That's enough fentanyl to kill you. That's how much it takes to end your life. So nanograms is what comes out. That's the toxicology report. Milligrams is what goes in. So about 2 milligrams going in will end up being about 0.5, 0.7 nanograms once it's processed through your body, which is enough to kill you because it only takes 0.2 nanograms to kill you. So he passed away at 0.7 nanograms, which means he had 3 times the amount of fentanyl in his system that required to kill him. So imagine that for just a moment. He took 1 pill that looked like 1 OxyContin, and he had 3 times the amount of drug in that 1 pill to kill him. And it did. So what's the point of all of this? Luckily in Aurora, we don't find fentanyl a whole lot now. That's not me saying that it isn't here. That's me saying that we don't find it a whole lot. And why don't we find it a whole lot? Because it's hard to find. Because it's just the same reason at the border it's hard to find. You get a pill bottle, looks like a real legit pill bottle. You got medicine in there, looks like Midol. And so we don't find it because we don't have a laboratory in our patrol car that allows us to test for fentanyl. So I suspect we find it a lot more than we know it. We could test everything with an opioid ampule and a drug test, but I don't know if you've been to some of these houses that have about 17,000 medicine bottles, but we don't have time to sit there and crush ampules for 2 weeks to test things for an opiate that shouldn't be there. So that's not me saying that we don't have it here, because we absolutely do. I'm basing my statement off of the fact that we don't have a whole lot of fentanyl overdoses happening in Aurora or Marionville. We have them. Just had one yesterday. I just stood in the living room of a man that was in his 50s that had been dead all day. The house was a wreck. It looks like he was very much awake when he overdosed, and it put him into a psychotic rage. Looks like he tore his apartment apart and died on the floor of the living room in a pile of his own vomit from a methadone overdose. You guys have heard of methadone? Do you know what methadone is? Methadone is a medication that is used to treat opioid addiction. So if you've heard of somebody going to a methadone clinic is somebody that gives you methadone, and you take methadone and it kind of satisfies the urge for an opioid, like OxyContin, hydrocodone, or something like that. The problem is that the reason that it feeds that appetite is because it has opioids in it. And so what happened with him was his addiction was going strong. And as I looked around his apartment, I found 7 bottles of it's in liquid form. I found 7 bottles of methadone empty that were supposed to have not been started until next week. And so he had just gotten them, and a little bit didn't do it for him, and a little bit more, and a little bit more, and a little bit more, and he eventually overdosed and died. So to say it doesn't happen in Aurora is just not true, because I stood and helped load up a dead man yesterday who overdosed on opioids. Now, it wasn't fentanyl, but I promise you he was taking methadone because of an opioid and probably a fentanyl addiction. That is probably 100% what it was, because heroin's not that available. Fentanyl is just a whole lot easier to get. So, case in point, especially, I know you young guys don't want me, I'm like Dad telling you not to do. If you're struggling, and listen to me now, if you're having a hard time, if things aren't going well, if you're not feeling like the way you think you should, if you're feeling like your brain is moving too fast and you just want to slow it down, you're feeling depressed and you're feeling whatever, for goodness sake, come down at least to the police department and talk to me and let me get you somebody to help you. Because the second that you say, I'm going to slow my own brain down and just deal with it on my own, and you get an opioid in your system, you're addicted. That's the end. You're done. Because it takes one fentanyl dose for you to become clinically addicted to an opioid, period. And every single time you take it, it is less and less and less effective for the high that you're wanting. So the first time we take an opioid, or the first time we take heroin, or the first time we take fentanyl, oh man, that was great. And then the next time we take it, it's like, well, that's pretty good, but it wasn't as good. And then the third time we take it, and we're like, man, I'm not feeling it, I'm going to take more. I'm not feeling it now, I'm taking more. Oh man, I'm going to take 4 pills instead of 1. Because it is your brain and your body is designed to wean yourself off of it, and that's exactly what it's trying to do. And you are just packing it full of more and eventually overdosing your body. It is a highly ineffective way to feel better for depression, because I just said, what is opioids? It is a depressant. It's just like alcohol. When people are depressed and they need a drink, what are they doing? They're depressing themselves more. It doesn't help. It doesn't work. It doesn't do what you're thinking it's going to do. It shuts you down. It slows you down. And eventually, it will kill you. You will just live a very, very unpleasant life, living in a very unpleasant situation until finally you overdose and die. I mean, I just can't say it any clearer or more to the point than that. I hate to be graphic about it, but that's just exactly what it is. And it only takes one. He said earlier, 1 pill can kill. I'm going to change that and tell you 1 pill will kill, because it only takes that 1 pill to do one of 2 things that's going to end your life. 1, you're going to overdose on it, or 2, you're going to become addicted to it. Both of those things will end your life. So 1 pill will kill. It will kill you. So when I came to the police department, I brought with me a drug task force, and we do a lot of drug intervention and things like that. And so I get, because I'm an executive board member of our task force, I get news updates from the Drug Enforcement Agency. So I just wanted to tell you a few things from just yesterday. Yesterday, May 13th, 2024, DEA and local partners seized more than 16 kilos of fentanyl powder and 60,000 fentanyl pills at a fast-moving investigation. May 13th, 2024, over 25 pounds of fentanyl and cocaine and $100,000 in cash seized in a Bronx apartment in New York. May 13th, 2024, Bridgeport fentanyl dealer involved in overdose death, arrested for murder. Nanograms kill you. How much do you think, how many people do you think you could kill with 25 pounds of fentanyl? So I'm going to give you a little scary statistic without getting too crazy about it. Last year in 2023, the Border Patrol, along with the DEA, seized at the border enough fentanyl to kill every human being on earth. Several times over. So when we're talking about pounds of fentanyl, we're talking about instant death to the entire population of here in Springfield and everywhere in between. So that's how small amount of this stuff it takes to just kill you. It doesn't get you high, okay? It does not get you high. It gets you down. That's the whole point of an opioid. It does not get you high. If somebody ever tells you that I like taking opioids or Percocet or hydrocodone because I want to get high on it, it is not a high. It never was a high. It never was intended to be a high. It didn't cause them to be happy or jittery. It didn't cause them to jump up and down and be happy. It caused them to simply sit and stare at their lap. That's all it did. That's the high that they're talking about. So don't get it twisted that any kind of an opioid is a high. What did I leave out, Mike? Just don't. If it did not come from a pharmacist into your hands or your mom and dad's hands, just simply don't take it. Period. I don't care if it's a Tylenol. I don't care if it's an ibuprofen. Thanks, but no thanks. I've got a dad at home. I love my dad more than anything in the world, but the man thinks that he's a pharmacist. And so if I say, I was on a cruise with him just a few weeks ago, and I said, oh man, I've got a headache, and he goes to work. Well, let's see what I've got. And I've got this, and I've got that, and it's like, Dad, I love you, and I don't think you would ever hurt me, but I am not taking medicine from somebody that did not hand it to me in a pill bottle that has a white coat on that says pharmacist on it, period. I know he got his medicine from the VA. I know that it's perfectly fine, but I am not taking it because, number one, it's prescribed to him and not me, and number two, I just simply have seen and packed up enough dead bodies that I'm just not going to take something that wasn't prescribed to me, period. And if you didn't buy it off the shelf at Walmart, if it's aspirin, Midol, ibuprofen, whatever, and it came out of somebody's purse, don't take it. Do not take it. If you've ever been, we're in church here, so everybody in here has probably been given a piece of gum from the bottom of mom's purse. It tasted like perfume, and it was, I know you know what I'm talking about, okay? That's where that pill came from. And I'm just gonna be graphic with you here for just a second, okay? There's a thing in law enforcement that we call the prison pocket, and that's where a lot of drugs come from, okay? And that prison pocket is located exactly where your bowel movements happen. And that is where a lot of this stuff was brought over into this country from. So keep that in mind as you move forward in this world, because if you wouldn't put their poop in your mouth, I highly suggest you not put their dope in your mouth either, because it's the same. It came from the same place. Yes, sir. Yeah. If you guys are more interested in some of this later on tonight, if you want to Google or go to YouTube and search up police officer overdoses on fentanyl, you'll get a whole bunch of videos of police officers who have found the Altoid can or the Crown Royal bag with dope in it, and the officer is looking at it and sees it and falls over like a log. And the reason is because the powder from fentanyl can absorb through your skin and overdose you just from touching it or breathing in the dust powder from it. And so we go through latex gloves at the PD like crazy which is fine with me because I don't want these guys touching that stuff. But just breathing it in can also cause an overdose, and it does. If you just go on there and Google and watch body cam of police officers overdosing, and that same thing can happen to any of you. That's why I'm really, really nervous about having canines right now in this world, because canines are breathing this stuff up and falling out, and just makes me nervous. And I've got a big heart for animals, and all he was doing was trying to get his tennis ball, and we overdosed him on fentanyl, and it's just not safe. And so I'm a little bit of an advocate of not putting canines out there looking for drugs. I don't mind them looking for people, but looking for drugs just makes me nervous, because the minute he takes a big sniff of it, he's done. I want to touch on one thing. You guys have heard of Narcan? There's legislation and rules and things like that that are coming that with any opioid prescription, you're going to get Narcan with it. And if you see somebody with Narcan, or there's Narcan laying around and you see somebody hurting or in what appears to be bad shape, go ahead and shoot some Narcan up their nose. It cannot and will not hurt you if you're wrong. Narcan is completely safe. It's like shooting water up your nose. It does absolutely nothing to you if there's no opioids in the system. But if there is opioids in the system, you're going to be a hero, because it instantly breaks that pain receptor, and they will literally come back to life on you. We do it. We carry Narcan in our patrol cars. The fire department carries Narcan, and so often we have somebody that appears to be completely dead, not breathing, no pulse, no heartbeat. We shoot Narcan, and all of a sudden they're sitting up, taking a deep breath, scared, don't know what happened, and it brings them back to life. And I know there's people with feelings about that. Well, if they were just a drug addict or whatever. But surely in a place like this, we can appreciate life as life. And we're going to do everything we can to save a life. Whether they're using that life for what they should be is not our business. But we're going to save it regardless. Any other questions? I'll take any questions anybody has. That happened in Joplin. Actually, that happened in what city? Gosh, I can't remember where that happened. Anyway, yeah, we got a call. Actually, on a search warrant. We were doing a search warrant, and we had an officer. We heard something and had an officer down. Didn't know what it was until we figured out. Got him situated. Got him to medical care. This was before Narcan. Got him to medical care. And they did blood work and found out that he had breathed in. He had some fentanyl in his system, and he had breathed it in from that search warrant. And so he did not die, but I've got actually a lot of stories. So that may not have been the same story, but I've got a lot of stories of this happening. Some of them are fatal. Some of them are not fatal. We've gotten pretty good in law enforcement about not getting too handsy with what we believe to be drugs and stuff, because it can just be absorbed so quickly. But yeah, go on and look up those videos. You'll see it. The officer's doing just fine. He's doing his business. He opens up whatever, shuts it back off, starts the car up, and over he goes in the car. There's a female officer not too long ago from Florida that same thing happened. She breathed in some fentanyl, down she went, and you'll actually see body cam of her getting Narcan in her nose and coming back out of it like what just happened. So we carry Narcan. We carry Narcan to save people's lives, but really we're prepared to save each other's lives in law enforcement because of all the nasty stuff we get involved in. What other questions? Yes, ma'am. Oh, yeah. Yeah, good question. Great question. Yes, we see Skittles. We see Pez. Pez dispensers, that's a pressed candy. Smarties, things like that are kind of like pills. They press it, make it bright and cheerful and colorful and all of that stuff to make it pretty unassuming. And you mentioned lacing. If you know somebody that has an addiction to things like marijuana, methamphetamine, and don't be that guy that tells me there's no addiction to marijuana. Yes, there is. There is a very big psychological addiction to marijuana. Marijuana will absolutely addict your brain, and it will fry it, and you will be functioning at a much lower level. Just watch Willie Nelson in an interview if you don't believe me. He's a good musician, but there's not a lot going on up there these days, and it's not because he's in his 90s. But you mentioned lacing. They lace marijuana with fentanyl now. They lace methamphetamine with fentanyl now. So when we go and we get methamphetamine off of a search warrant or a drug bust, we test it, and oftentimes it will test both for methamphetamine and opioids because it's got fentanyl laced into it. Well, that's a good question. Any other questions? Yeah. I don't know what he was taking or not taking, but if you were taking, let's say he did have a prescription to OxyContin and he was taking it as prescribed and everything was fine. He ran out and didn't have time to go to the pharmacy, or the opiates usually are only good for 30 days, 60 days, and then you're required to go back and see the doctor. They're not just going to constantly refill it. So let's say that that person had a prescription to OxyContin and the pill bottle was empty. He was hurting, he was in pain, he couldn't get to the doctor on time, and he took this OxyContin. Remember, with fentanyl laced into it, that one pill is now 100 times stronger than it was when he was taking his prescribed amount. So whether he was taking it or not wouldn't matter because the fentanyl killed him. It wouldn't have been the OxyContin. Because if you take a OxyContin or whatever as prescribed, it is not prescribed in an amount that would kill you for your body size. In the background, doctors are weighing you and doing all of these things and putting in calculations, and the pharmacist looks at the same data and makes sure that we're giving you what you're supposed to get. And people underappreciate the knowledge of pharmacists. I promise that if you go over here and talk to Doc Morrison or one of the pharmacists, they're going to know probably 10 times more about prescription medication than probably even your doctor does. And so pick their brain, and they'll tell you, well, this amount and this amount and this amount and this amount. And so they know how much opiate to give you to not hurt you, but to manage your pain. The Mexican cartel down in Chihuahua, Mexico, that's dropping drops into baking powder and stamping it has no idea, nor does he care, how much is safe. Any other questions? These are good questions. Fire them. Sure, yeah, go ahead. Yeah. I never say never, but I will say probably unlikely. What she's saying is if you ever go on a cruise down to Mexico and go to a port like Cozumel or wherever, you might see on the shelves some prescription medication that requires a prescription in the United States, and in Mexico you can just buy it right off of the shelf. That's probably medicine that is legitimately from that company, and they just don't require a prescription in Mexico. So Mexico doesn't have the controls on their medical system like we do. Some people say that that's because America is profit-driven in their pharmaceuticals. Some people might say that Mexico just doesn't have enough regulations. Whatever you want to say to that is, I'll go with you. It doesn't matter. But a lot of prescription medication you can just buy. However, in Mexico, they do have controls on opioids, and so they do not just sell an opioid painkiller off the shelf. A lot of the medication that you're seeing sold off the shelf are things like Cialis, men's Viagra, Cialis type things, diabetic medication like metformin and things like that. Things like that that are pretty vanilla is what you can buy right off of the shelf without a prescription. A lot of folks go down to Mexico too for surgical things. You might see somebody go down there for MS. Multiple sclerosis is a popular thing that up here in the United States, there's a surgery that they do down in Mexico that they won't do up in the United States, or a lot of insurance companies won't cover it. So they go down to Mexico and pay cash for this MS surgery. Same type of deal. It's just less regulation, less all of that. You're kind of putting your trust in, people. But with those surgeries, what you'll find is that it's not a Mexican doctor. It's an American doctor that flies down to Mexico with you to do the surgery, where he can do it without getting in trouble. It's not you're not going down there and getting a cartel guy cutting your head open. It's, they just go down there to perform a surgery that they're not allowed to perform up in the United States. Yeah, there's two types of fentanyl in the world. Fentanyl that you get at the doctor's office or at the hospital is still strong, still an effective painkiller, but legal and controlled. The other kind of fentanyl is what you're buying or getting a hold of from the street, and the problem is, and the whole point of this is, it's hard to tell. You just don't know. And so you guys have probably heard, some of you adults probably heard back 10, 15 years ago, the fentanyl patches were a big deal. So pain fentanyl patches, throw them on and all of that, and we had guys going out and stealing them. And so these guys would go out and steal these fentanyl patches and put them in an oven, bake them to where they were dry, scrape off the fentanyl, and then combine it and then use the fentanyl to overdose and to use as an illicit drug. So they kind of cut off the fentanyl patches for anything outside of the medically controlled environment. So, like I said, Americans will intoxicate themselves if they have an opportunity at all. They just will do it. I was just reading an article that now we're going to have to put controls on Imodium because kids are taking Imodium in high amounts and feeling high for about 20 minutes and then dying of constipation a little bit after that. So I don't know. Like they were eating Tide Pods, so I don't know. Whatever. If you're needing, and I always say this, if you are feeling like you need something to do, like eating a Tide Pod or taking Imodium or whatever, come down to the Aurora Police Department. We'll put you to work. You won't have time to worry about that stuff. We'll let you wash cars and all of that stuff. We'll keep you busy. And by the end of the day, you won't even think about taking too much Imodium. Any other questions? Oh, yes. Oh, yes. But since Chief Coatney's coming to town, be careful who you buy from, because I've got guys out here right now that are looking like the bottom of the earth. They look rough, they smell rough, they're ugly, they have tattoos, they smell awful, they smoke, but they've got a DEA badge, and they'll sell you dope, and then you're going to be in trouble. Or they'll come up to you and try to buy dope. So Aurora and Marionville are actually quite a dangerous place right now to operate in the drug world, because there's a really good likelihood that we're going to wind up kicking your door in at some point. So we started up an SRT team here, and we just so far in 2024, just for mathematical purposes, just so far in 2024, we've kicked in more doors in Aurora and Marionville than the PD had in the previous 15 years combined. So we're going after it, yeah. We're part of the Comet Drug Task Force. Like I said, I'm on the executive board for that. One of the things that I did was when I became an executive member of the Comet Drug Task Force, I noticed that the Comet Drug Task Force was based down there by Branson, and I was like, that's just too far away. So, hey, wait a minute, I'm an executive board member. I get to say where they're at. So now they're here. So we moved their offices up here. Can't tell you where they're at, but they're operated. So there's about, I don't know, 10, 11, 12 counties, and all of that now is located out of right here in Aurora or Marionville. I'll let you pick where. Yeah, but when I came here, I asked y'all over Facebook, what do you want? What's the problem here? What's going on? Now, I was raised here. I went to school here. I was a policeman here. I know what the problem is, but I wanted you to tell me. And drugs are the big problem. And I will tell you from 25 years in law enforcement that drugs and addiction is the central problem. Burglary, theft, stealing, all of that other stuff is just simply problems that are related to that most of the time. So, yeah, go ahead. Yeah, so I think what your question is, when somebody's got a medical marijuana card and we pull them over and they seem to be under the influence of marijuana, how do we handle that? So that's a really good question, and I'm going to answer that question, and everybody in here can hear it and spread it and tell all of your friends. You cannot be impaired on anything and drive a motor vehicle in Missouri, okay? So that is alcohol, that is marijuana, that is prescription medication, that is anything that might inhibit your ability to safely operate a motor vehicle. So in Missouri, you guys have heard of driving under the influence and driving while intoxicated. So a lot of people get it in their head that DUI is for drugs and DWI is for alcohol. So in Missouri, DWI catches everything. So to answer your question specifically, if we pull you over and we smell marijuana and you appear to be impaired, okay? Now just having marijuana on your system does not necessarily mean you're impaired. So, but if we detect marijuana and you're operating a motor vehicle, then we're probably going to do some tests, just like we do for alcohol. It'll be just the same, only we'll do some different tests. So we'll do a Romberg balance, we'll do a vertical nystagmus instead of a horizontal nystagmus, and we'll do some things like that. All of my officers now have been trained on drug detection and alcohol detection. So when they pull you over, they're going to do things that you don't realize they're doing to see what the situation is. They may stay back here, have you look back. That puts your eyes at maximum deviation. They check for things to happening just while they're talking to you or just while they're having a conversation with you. And so if they detect impairment, or maybe the driving was bad, maybe they were weaving and maybe all over the road, or maybe made a bad turn or whatever, and all of that combined leads them to believe that you are driving while impaired on marijuana or anything, then the law applies. We'll make the arrest for driving while intoxicated, and then we'll do either a breath test if we think it's alcohol or a blood test. I'll tell you, law enforcement now, we don't use the breath tester all that much, and the reason for that is because there's so many other things that people are taking. It's not just alcohol usually anymore, so we go ahead and do a blood test. Even if it's an alcohol intoxicated, we'll go ahead and go over to the hospital or something and get a blood test, because a lot of times what we'll find is, yes, there's alcohol, but also there's everything else, meth and whatever, fentanyl and all that, and that just kind of tells us why this person was driving so badly. So, yes, to answer your question, whether it's medical marijuana or not, doesn't matter. If you're impaired and it makes it to where you can't drive safely and we detect it, then the arrest for DWI will happen. We do a lot of marijuana DWI enforcement now because, of course, we legalized it, and so it's more accessible. And I don't personally care about, I know a lot of law enforcement would probably tell you, oh, this was stupid to legalize marijuana or whatever. I don't care. Here's the thing: as long as we're going to keep alcohol legal, marijuana doesn't have the impact on somebody that alcohol usually does. So, very rarely have I ever been in a fight with somebody on marijuana, but I've been in a fight with a lot of people on alcohol. So, I don't know that I particularly care that much. The only concern I have is that we've now doubled the amount of things you can intoxicate yourself on and go out and drive. That's what scares me. In Colorado, their fatal accident numbers when they legalized marijuana went up 100%. So it's scary, but we just got to go out and do enforcement. Sorry, that was a really long answer to that question, but it's a good question. Is anybody? Yeah. Burnt tea leaves to me. So I don't know how to describe it, but it's one of those things, you know it when you smell it, kind of thing. But the best description I can come up with is if you opened up your Lipton tea bag and put it into a pot and didn't put water in there and turned your burner on high and let it start smoking, kind of smells like that to me. But I don't know, it probably smells differently to different people. The bottom line is it stinks horribly. It smells terrible, and I'll tell you, not a whole lot of people actually smoke it. Now that it's been legalized, most of it is edible now. So if we see somebody impaired on marijuana, it's usually not from the smell. It'll be from eyes and things like that because they bought gummies or brownies or cookies or eye drops, or they even have marijuana THC infused bottled water now. So you can be driving down the road drinking your Gatorade with THC in it. So the smoking is actually not all that. The only time people really are smoking marijuana now is if they bought it from somebody that grew it in grandpa's field somewhere. Yeah, and it's probably full of stems and seeds, and they're not really getting high off of it anyway. They just think they're cool. Yes, ma'am. Yes, you can buy it at Walmart now. You can buy it. It's entirely up to you. If you want to get involved, great. If you don't want to get involved, that's great too. Completely personal choice, just like CPR. I will tell you, in Missouri, we have a Good Samaritan law that protects you. So if you go in and try to help somebody in an emergency situation and it doesn't go well or they end up dying or whatever, you're not going to be held liable for the things that you did in Missouri. So you're covered there. Thank goodness we still have that law. Some states don't. So policemen and ambulance drivers and all of that now are opened up to be sued if they're not saving somebody's life or whatever. But you would be covered. People would be covered the same way. And literally all Narcan is a nose spray. Just open it up and spray it up their nose. Any other questions? Yes, ma'am. Could be, yeah. Yep. Yeah. Luckily, they've made those now where you can't bake it off anymore because it's you basically destroy the product before you could get it baked off. But with the time release, kind of the same thing happened with Sudafed. They put a time release gel over it where you couldn't make meth with it as easy. And there for a while when they first started, it was kind of funny, they first started putting those gel timed releases on Sudafed and pseudoephedrine. We started finding pink methamphetamine because they had tried to use the meth to cook it and it had time release. So the meth was what the meth users would call trash because it had that time release and it didn't get them high. They just wasted their time and money with it. What other questions? Yeah. Yeah. Good question. So mom and dad living in the fantastic houses that you see delivering meals around Aurora. Mom and Dad are sitting around in the living room. They got the TV on. They start taking their methamphetamine that's laced with fentanyl. They pass out from the use, and we've got now 3- and 4-year-olds running around the house doing whatever they want to do, and that's how we see kids getting under the influence of all kinds of things. We just sent some kids to the CAC not too long ago that tested positive for methamphetamine, and it was because Mom and Dad were unconscious, and they went out and did, kids will do what they see Mom and Dad do, so, they see that stuff laying there next to Mom and Dad, and they've seen Mom and Dad taking it, and that's just what they do, We have kids that want to go in and bake cookies because we saw Mom and Grandma bake cookies. No different with drugs. They saw Mom and Dad using it, so they're going to go use it too. It's disgusting and sad and angry as that makes me. That's just the reality, but that's why I've been doing it for 25 years. So try to keep that from happening as much as I possibly can. But yes, it is not uncommon at all to find 3, 4, 2-year-old kids with positive tests for any number of things. And fentanyl takes such a little amount that, they get a hold of it, just touch it. Just touch the pill that Mom and Dad didn't take, and they may overdose and die, but will probably be positive for it either way. Disgusting. What other questions? Anything? All right. I'll turn it back over to Pastor. I probably took longer than I should have.
Thank you. All right. Oh, one of y'all's phones, I'm guessing. I definitely don't want to answer your phone. Mine rings enough. I don't need that one. So, we do thank you guys for coming and sharing your heart and the information. Can you tell me that number, that first year, the number of fentanyl, was it 70-some thousand? 70,000. I looked up just a second ago, and the population of Joplin, Missouri is 52,000. So that would be more than the whole city of Joplin just being wiped out every year. And actually, it's more than that now as it's coming. So just imagine that the city of Joplin just be gone in a year. And that is the drug overdose that's happening in our country, right? Was that the country? So think about that. That's kind of hard to imagine, isn't it? But it is happening, and it is real. So, Wes, thank you. Thank you guys for coming, for sharing. Thank you all for coming tonight. If you would, go ahead and stand and let's pray. I would encourage you to continue to pray for our law enforcement. I know they take a bad rap often in this day and age, but I'm telling you there's a lot of very, very, very good police officers out there standing in harm's way. And we're thankful for them, so grateful for them. So continue to pray for them, lift them up. Continue to pray for families that are affected even in this drug world. Because I promise you probably every single one of us have someone in our family that is dealing and battling with drugs, including alcohol. So remember that. Let's close with a word of prayer, and you'll be dismissed tonight. Father, we do thank you for this night. We thank you, Lord, just for the information, Lord, you've allowed us to hear tonight. Lord, tonight we do lift up Wes and all of his men. Lord, as every day they get into harm's way, Lord, we just pray that you would protect them, that, Lord, that you would use them, Lord, in this city and in this area, that you would, Lord, just use them in a mighty way. Lord, I pray that we would continue to pray for them in this day and age and things that they're facing. I pray for their families, their children, and, Lord, everything about who they are. Lord, I also pray for the families that have lost loved ones to drugs, to alcohol, all different things. Lord, it is a battle that we're facing in this world. So, Lord, I pray even for our churches that are in this area, Lord, we pray that we would reach out to this lost and dying world. Lord, even the drug addict, Lord, that Wes and them have brought back to life. Lord, we pray for their soul, that we might be able to share the gospel with them, that they might have a life and a heart that is changed, and, Lord, that would live for you. So, Lord, I pray that as we go into our world, Lord, you've not pulled us out. You've left us here to share the gospel and to reach these people. So, Lord, I do pray for all the drug addicts in this area. I pray, Lord, for all the ones that are battling addiction. Lord, I pray that they would see light and they would see hope. that comes in your Son. Lord, I thank you for tonight. I thank you, Lord, for what's been shared. I pray, Lord, that you would just take it and we could use it to, Lord, just be informed of our world that we live in. We thank you and we praise you. It's in Christ's name that we pray. Amen. Thank you, guys, tonight. You're dismissed tonight.